Good morning, everyone. We're going to start Great Term Biology for this time. So the chapter that we're going to use is Chapter 18, Variation and Selection. Okay, the variation and selection. What is the meaning behind the term variation? The term variation means like there's different kinds and different types or forms of anything. So the variation here we're going to talk about in this chapter is involving the differences between the individuals of the same species. We've got a phenotypic variation, which is caused by both genetic and environmental factors. There's a term called continuous variation, which is influenced by the genes and the environment, resulting in a range of phenotypes, which is a variation between two extremes, like for an example, height in humans, like it differs from a person to another. And another term called discontinuous variation, which is caused by the genes alone and result in limited number of distinct phenotypes, like for an example, the blood group. There's something called mutation. When I say like this, in this cell or in this sort of species, a mutation has occurred or happened, that means the genetic sequence of this human being or this animal has changed. The gene mutation is a change in the base sequence of the DNA. So the mutation here is the way in which the allies are formed, and ionizing radiation and some chemicals increase the rate of mutation. That's why we sometimes hear that that sort of chemical is not, we can say like it's not really preferable if we get exposed to it, because by the continuous exposure to it, we will have something called gene mutation. The mutation is a source of variation, for an example, in Down syndrome, where a parent's chromosomes are unevenly distributed in meiosis. And in fertilization, a zygote with a number of chromosomes that it's not 46 is created, for an example 23 and 24. So the characteristic for those who have Down syndrome, we would have a broad forehead, more likely as flat, a short neck, downward sloping eyes. Their eyes are kind of like having those dropping shape, short nose, and mental retardation. That means they're mentally unstable. Another thing regarding this chapter and variation, it's also known something related to the blood disorder. It's called sickle cell anemia. That means the RBCs, the normal red blood cells, are not having the exact normal shape as it should be. The disease in which the red blood cells have a sickle shape instead of a round biconcave shape, controlled by the recessive ally, which causes weakness, aching joints, and poor circulation. Why poor circulation? Because the red blood cells are not normal in shape, so practically they won't last longer and they won't functionize as they should be. The fact that it's a recessive means that a heterozygous person can be a carrier. They have the ally, but it's not expressed. Being a carrier of sickle cell anemia makes you resistant to malaria. In equatorial Africa, being sickle cell anemic causes death, malaria causes death, but the carriers have immunity to malaria and have some symptoms of anemia. In severe cases, they are very, very weak. Another thing that, by the way, for the sickle cell anemia, it could be like just the mother who is carrying it, and it could be both parents. But both of them, sometimes they're not aware that they have the disease. Adaptive features. If I'm going to tell you, how is the camel being adaptive to live in the desert? You will tell me that the camel has a hump. It has like long lashes to survive, to make it survive and prevent the sand, especially in a storm, sandy storm, to go through their eyes. It have that sort of like the the leg sort of shape that prevents it from getting deeper into the sand, and the hump for storing the fat for so many days just in case if it doesn't get the proper amount of feeding or drinking water. So this is what we call how an animal is adaptive to live in its own habitat. The adaptive features here, it could be an inherited feature that helps an organism to survive and reproduce in its own environment. The inherited functional features of an organism that increases its fitness. When I say fitness, that means the probability of an organism surviving and reproducing in the environment. The xerophids, which they live in deserts where water is scarce and evaporation is rapid, or in windy habitats. Their features are deep roots. I'm talking here about plants, by the way. Deep roots to reach water far underground, leaves reduced spines with minimum surface area for transpiration, the shallow spreading of roots to collect the rain, the rolled leaves, leaf hair and stomata sunk in pits to trap most of the air. Also, waxy leaf cuticle, like when you come and check the leaf of any sort of plant, try to spray it with water and see what happens. You will find out that the droplets of water has actually slipped from the leaf itself. Why? Because it's covered with a waxy sort of substance which is impermeable water. Stomata opening at night and closed at midday when evaporation is highest. The stomata here, or practically the guard cells that is on each of the stomata inside of the leaves, just beneath the surface of the leaf, actually act as a gate to more likely be selective to what sort of gases get in and out, like for the cactus and the marram grass. The hydrophytes live in wholly or partly submerged in water. Their features are the leaves are highly divided to create large surface area for absorption and photosynthesis, because the more surface area I have, the more light I will be absorbing, so I can do more photosynthesis. I'm pretty much sure that you went through this in grade 7 and 8. Very little cuticle formation, lack of xylem tubes, because we know that xylem tubes are like a pipe through the stem, which allows the movement of water and minerals from the root to the stem and so on to the leaves. So no stomata underside of leaves. Stomata in the upper surface has a thick waxy layer to repel water and keep the stomata open and clear. As for the roots, they often reduced and root hairs are often absent. Those who are submerged in water, you won't find any roots or root hair cells. Only the root hair cells for those who actually grow in soil, because the root hair cells are the tiny extensions of the root. They are more submerged in the soil, more expanded to enable or actually absorb much water and minerals to take it back to the plant. We've got something else here, it's called natural selection. The greater chance of passing on the genes by the best adapted organisms. The variation is a natural and random change in all living organisms. The variation here leads to survival of the fittest, since the variations in certain organisms allow that organism to have an advantage over the others. And the surviving organisms reproduce, since they don't get eaten up. So practically here, I don't think that you would prefer such non-variation, because it's like when I have, for an example, let's take it the zoo. The zoo here, or even in the wild, I have the lion, I've got the zebra, I've got the gazelle, I've got like lots of variation, and each one of them lives its own way and in its own environment or habitat, which allows it to make its own food, reproduce, and all those things. So this is what we call actually a variable habitat, or a variation in general. Evolution is caused by natural selection, which is caused by a change in the environment. Artificial selection is breeding organisms with valued characteristic. More likely is like if I have I want to improve the quality of a milk, for an example, or I want to improve a quality of some crops. I would here try to genetically change them. So is breeding organism with valid characteristic together in order to produce offspring, which is babies, or anything that comes as a product from two things united together. So these, which shares those useful characteristics, we will call it selective breeding. So I'm taking the best in each thing and I'm combining it together to get something which is outstanding. Can be used to produce organisms which are more economically valued. Sorry. For example, like cows that produce more milk, wheat that is easier to separate for grain, dogs which have better appearance. The selective breeding here, selecting by humans of individuals with desirable features, crossing 3 individuals to produce the next generation. Resistance to antibiotic. We all know that at a certain level you shouldn't be taking antibiotics unless it's a severe case. Why? Because bacteria keeps on generating and improving itself towards this specific antibiotic. Therefore, this antibiotic, if you happen to get ill again and you take it, it will no longer work on it. Why? Because it enhanced itself by being resistant to this antibiotic. So strains of antibiotic-resistant bacteria are developing as the use of antibiotics is increasing. In a group of many bacteria, one might mutate to be resistant to the antibiotic. As a result, it reproduces and the others die, making a new strain of bacteria which is resistant to antibiotic. The weak bacteria are killed first and only resistant or strong bacteria is left. This is regarding the chapter of variation and selection. Okay, now we go to Biotechnology, chapter 20, Biotechnology and Genetic Engineering. What is biotechnology and genetic engineering? Like when I use this sort of knowledge or sort of science, more likely as I want to improve the quality of almost everything which I find it more less favorable. So bacteria are useful in biotechnology and genetic engineering due to the rapid reproduction. For an example, if I'm going to bake some bread or I'm going to make pizza, I would add yeast just to improve the quality of this sort of baking thing or this thing that I'm actually trying to make and have it like more fluffy, more rosin, and it helps me out. The same thing when I'm actually adding those enzymes to the washing powder, soap, so it kind of attacks the stains and removes them. So by here it's like I'm actually improving the quality of the cleansing product. Why microorganisms are used? Bacteria and fungi are small and easy to grow in lab and they reproduce quickly, so it doesn't take much space and no ethical issues involved. Plus, the genetic code is the same for bacteria as for human, and bacteria have loops of DNA called plasmids, which are easy to transfer from one another. Making biofuel. Use plants to make sugar which yeast then breaks it down to make ethanol. The ethanol is an alcohol and can be used as a fuel. Maize, for an example, like corn, is treated with amylase enzyme. So here I'm transferring starch to glucose and then I add yeast, so the glucose used in respiration and make it respire anaerobically with 0 presence of oxygen. The ethanol, or the alcohol here, is produced extracted by distillation and mixed with gasoline. So it's more likely as gasoholic, because it's a combination between gasoline and an alcohol like ethanol, and we can use it to increase the energy used by cars. Bread making, like when I'm trying to bake, girls will know it much better here. Like flour, sugar, warm water and salt are mixed with the yeast to make the dough. The amylase here breaks down some starch to make maltose and glucose. This is used by the yeast in respiration. The dough is kept in a warm, moist environment, and yeast here ferments, or the fermentation process occurs in making carbon dioxide, which actually makes the dough rises. So, and then I bake it, so it kills the yeast and evaporates alcohol and hardens out the surface. This is the process of bread making. One of the things that actually enhances the activity of microorganisms is like, why do all our mothers tell us like, don't leave anything outside, especially in the summer, in hotty days, because it can, like, especially like in milk, like milk, yogurt, cheese, even anything that it's like doughs and stuff like that, it kind of like has that stinky smell afterwards, and you can smell like something is going a bit slightly alcoholic. Why? Because like it has gone through a fermentation process, and especially for milk it goes like a bit soury and acidic. Uses of enzymes. For an example, pectinase, it's a fruit juice, are extracted using pectinase because it breaks down inside of the cells of the fruit. So pectin helps plant walls stick together. If pectin is broken down, it's easier to squeeze juice from the fruit. So extraction of juice from fruit, making juice clear, not cloudy. So we add pectinase because pectinase gets all the water out of the cells, so it makes it easier for you to get more juice, as much as you can, from that fruit. Washing powders, like soap in general, Dixan for washing the clothes and stuff like that. These biological washing powders and liquids contain enzymes that help them remove the stain, and the enzymes are coated with special wax that melts in the wash, releasing the enzyme. Once the stain have been broken down, they are easier for detergents to remove. The protease breaks down protein in stains, like grass and blood. Lipase breaks down the fat and oil. Carbohydrates breaks down the carbohydrate-based stains, like starch. The lactase enzyme that breaks down lactase, sugar, which is found in milk. People can't stop making lactase naturally, therefore making lactase naturally, therefore can't digest lactose. Those who have like allergy, or they are born and they don't have the lactase enzyme naturally by themselves, so practically you will find them going to stores and trying to find free lactose milk. But so nowadays, since the biotechnology and genetic engineering has been present, so practically they can find this sort of product. Also, those who try to seek for a gluten-free flour to make, like, to live a normal life and bake whatever they want with the gluten-free, because it's like before they couldn't, so they just had to cut these all and you know, like just, you know, they can't like have it. It's like for them it's forbidden, otherwise they would get sick. But nowadays, like, free gluten flour is available, lactose-free milk is available, so practically they can live a normal life just like us. Also produce glucose and galactose used in sweets. Making penicillin, which is an antibiotic produced by a fungus called penicillium, which is, we can use a stainless steel fermentation vessel filled with the medium containing sugars and ammonium salts. This would be the 2 chapters for biology for today. I hope you got it. Furthermore, I'll be waiting for your questions. Thank you.